Hi, I'm Robin Stelkup. I'm the data owner for the cohort graduation 4-year and 5-year validations and the NCES graduation and dropout validation. This training is pre-recorded and should be posted on or close to October 15th. This is the second part of our training on graduation and dropout rates and reporting. And the first training focused a lot on exit adjustment. This second training focuses on the grad drop rates, how they're calculated and how to interpret those calculations, and how to review your data and validate your data in the Achievement Data Insight validation displayer. So validations are on schedule to open next Thursday on October 22nd. And so let's get started. If I can figure out how to advance the slides. All right. Okay, so ODE has a very strong commitment to equity in education. And now more than ever, we stand up for equity with our partners at districts, schools, educational service districts, and other community leaders. Every student deserves access to a high quality, well-rounded education and to be able to achieve graduation with a plan for their future. And our equity stance, this is just stating very plainly, we want the best for every student. And we recognize that that best education has not always been easy to obtain for certain groups. Educational equity is the equitable implementation of policy, practices, procedures, and legislation that translates into resource allocation, education rigor, and opportunities for historically and currently marginalized youth, students, and families, including civil rights protected classes. This means the restructuring and dismantling of systems and institutions that create the dichotomy of beneficiaries and the oppressed and marginalized. Okay, so what we're going to discuss today, we're going to be going over the dates and what's going to happen with the validations and also exit adjustment a little bit. And the validations include the cohort graduation rates and the NCES dropout and graduation rates, and also a little bit on the fall membership validation. I'm also the data owner for that validation as well. And we'll be looking at slides that show screenshots of validations so we can learn how to view our data and interpret the data, and then also how to make corrections to the data. We'll go over the methodology of how we collect student data and then calculate the rates for graduation and dropout. And we'll also go over some examples of different scenarios of student enrollment and student outcomes and how those affect the rates. And throughout the slides, there are going to be links on certain slides, and then at the very end of the presentation, there will be a page full of links to different resources that you have, guidance on different aspects of graduation and dropouts, and the policy manuals, and also how to contact your regional ESD partners and myself. So we have a lot of dates to keep in mind. And so next week, the validations open. We have the NCES dropout and graduation rate validation. We have the cohort graduation rate for 4-year and the cohort graduation rate for 5-year. Those are two separate validations. Those all should open on time next Thursday. October 26th, that will be the day that first period cumulative ADM closes. Now you can get first period cumulative ADM reopened most of the time. So, and then I'll mention again when it closes at the very bottom of this slide. It closes for good. October 26th, that is the day first period closes. November 5th, first period cumulative ADM audits for 2021. That audit review window opens, and I believe it closes on the 13th. So that's your time to review those audits. Also on November 5th is when first period, not first period, fall membership validation opens for 2021. Okay, first period audit review window does close on November 13th. And December 4th, that is when the annual cumulative ADM for 1920 exit adjustment window closes. And so right now, after you've submitted your first period, you're looking at your exit adjustment review screens, and that opportunity will close on December 4th. December 11th, a week later, the graduation and dropout validations close. And then on December 31st, that is the final graduation and dropout rate refresh in ADI. January 14th is the second period cumulative ADM for 2021. That's when the audit window opens, and that audit window then closes the following week. And so if you have a lot of the second period audits are going to impact first period, and they actually apply to first period records. And so you really need to get on to those second period audits as soon as you can, because fall membership validation and first period, the last day to edit first period ends on January 22nd. And so you have a short window, and January 22nd is a Friday. So if you're a 4-day school or have a 4-day school week, that doesn't give you a lot of time to get that data corrected and make sure that it's accurate. And so we will be releasing the cohort graduation and dropout reports sometime in January, between January 14th and January 22nd. I have not met with the communications team, so we have not scheduled a time yet. And then the public release for fall membership, I hope you're not seeing a blue line. I'll have to pay attention to that. There's a line on my screen down at the bottom. And so the last line of this table reads public fall membership report release to be determined. And historically, that's been close to the 1st of February. So I expect it will happen first or second week of February. Again, I need to meet with the communications team and schedule those times. So so those are the dates that you should keep in mind. And you should keep in mind that you have to make sure you get your exit adjustment done by December 4th. We'll be talking about appeals and when to submit those. It's best to submit things earlier than later, and December 4th should be your thinking ahead for your deadlines for any appeals you have. December 31st, those data will be final. And I'll actually discuss the last day to make changes to the data. And then January 22nd, that is your drop dead deadline for first period. Hopefully you've done most of your changes earlier during the calendar year or during the school year. So, all right. So the validations. This is an overview. We have 3 validations that are to be opened. The NCES dropout and graduation rates, and that's for dropout and graduation events that occur during the 1920 school year. It's our oldest rate, and it's very consistent. Although there is a graduation rate calculated with this validation, that is not our official graduation rate. It's a 1-year graduation rate, and we report that to the U.S. Department of Education, but we do not publish it. The cohort rates are our official rates. Cohort graduation rates are calculated for the 4-year cohort. Those are students who entered high school in 2016-17 and graduated on time. And then we also calculate cohort graduation rates for the 5-year cohort. Those are students who entered high school in 2015-16 and have been in school for 5 years. So this rate is really close to last year's 4 rate because these were very similar group of students. And this 5-year rate also includes any new students who enrolled with a 15-16 high school entry year, or students who had a high school entry year appeal that changed to 15-16. But this is a relatively small number of students, so usually these rates are pretty close. So most of the work that you've done to determine this rate was done last year for the 4-year cohort, but we really encourage you to review the data and make sure they're correct. All right, so we publicly release the rates and rates for different student groups in media files. That will be happening toward the end of January, like I explained a couple slides ago. And these rates also appear on the school and district at-a-glance reports. Those are published in the fall. This year we had abbreviated data, but the data will still include graduation rates, and that is on the adapted at-a-glance report that we adapted in response to the pandemic. But next year, hopefully, we will have our normal at-a-glance reports, and those will be coming out in fall of 2021. And then we also submit our data in federal reports to the U.S. Department of Education, and that's in EdFax reports. And then also the graduations are considered in the SPRI reports, which is a special education progress report. And so your special ed administrators are very interested in these rates because that affects their goals in this other special education report. And then we also get data requests from researchers and from members of the public. And so when those requests come in, I or another person at the agency usually handle those requests. And so anyway, so this data does get used and it does get looked at by a wide number of people. All right, so right now, exit adjustment is currently open, and first period is also open. You should be getting that submitted. If you have a problem submitting first period or getting to exit adjustment on time, you should email myself or Amanda Leopard with first period to let us know. And then fall membership is coming up November 5th is when it opens. And I do not do a training for fall membership. I have a very comprehensive membership manual that covers the fall and the spring validations. And that membership manual is pretty close to being finished. I have a few more edits to make to it, and then it'll be posted on the district and the public website. And so fall membership manual, like I say, right now we have the 1920 manual out there. If you want to look at it, there's not really too many differences between last year and this year. But I suspect this membership manual will come out after the 22nd, after these 3 other validations get started, because I have just too much to do to get those out on time to get the manual done before the 22nd. So, and all of these fall membership and the 3 graduation dropout validations appear in Achievement Data Insight, ADI. Okay, so exit adjustment. It opened last week on October 8th, and it closes December 4th. That's a Friday. And this is not a collection. It is a review window into annual cumulative ADM for 1920. And it only looks at very specific data fields, data columns in those ADM records, and you can't submit new records to them. If you need to add new records, you should contact your regional ESD partner and ask that they open annual cumulative ADM. You can also talk to Amanda Lepper, the data owner for ADM, or you can send me an email and I can open that as well. So to learn more about exit adjustment, you should really watch the first part of this training, which was recorded before October 1st and then posted on October 1st at the video training website on the district website. And so there's a lot of information in this first training about when you need to submit program type 14 records and to which collection you need to submit them into, and certain timelines, whether you receive a document after a certain time or before a certain time. So for those kinds of questions and information and guidance, you should look at that first training that we had. And you can also add program type 14 records to first period, and like I say, there are certain situations where you're going to add them to annual or you're going to add them to first period, depending on when you receive the information, the documentation. Okay, so just to again talk about exit adjustment. There are calculated indate codes that are calculated on the last annual record we receive for a school year for a student, and those are refreshed nightly, and they depend on all the data that's being reported. So if the student has attended multiple schools, you may not necessarily have access to those records. You'll only have access to your own district and school's records. But ODE has everyone's records, and so we look at all the records we receive and calculate the indate codes. And we try to make this as simple as possible. And do not assume that the calculated indate code is necessarily the correct one for this student. We kind of have a rough ballpark estimate that maybe 50 to 70%, but probably closer to 50% of the calculated indate codes are correct. So, you know, we realize also too that this is a moving process. ADM isn't finished yet, and there are other districts that haven't finished submitting their first period ADM records. So you may not see the correct calculated indate code because that first period record hasn't been put into the system yet. And you may have a records request, but these codes may not reflect that. Finally, rely on the validations that are coming out for final resolved outcomes and accountability. They are much more reliable than the calculated intake code. So again, for the first part of the training, that's link is listed here at the bottom of the slide. Okay, so fall membership. We're going to just do a little bit of overview of that because fall membership is an unduplicated count of students enrolled in your district on October 1st. So this is basically an extract of first period. And this also means, because this is the count of the first school day in October, that the end date in first period cumulative ADM 2021 must be October 2nd, because the end date for any record you submit to ADM or to class roster or other collections at ODE will be the first weekday after the end of a class or the end of an enrollment. So this year that will be October 2nd as the end date. And as a note, the fall membership report is based on the attending district and the attending school, but the NCES graduation dropout validation is based on the resident district for these same data. So fall membership numbers will not exactly match with the NCES graduation dropout validation denominator. The denominator is based on the fall membership, but it's not exactly the same because it's resident district. And you have the ability to edit fall membership after grad drop is finished. So we recommend prioritizing grad drop first because you have a limited time to get that information in, and so you do want to pay attention to some of our recommendations about what to do first, what to do second. And so grad drop is going to end in December, so you really need to get that work on those students first. And the regional ESD partners can help you out with fall membership, or they can help you out with the grad drop validations. That is something they're very good at, and they love to do it, I should say. And so you do have help out there to help you make sure that your records get submitted accurately and on time. All right, so when we're talking about public releases and validations, the things that you look at while the validation is open, that data will be embargoed. That means that the data cannot be shared publicly, and they cannot be shared with people other than authorized district staff. For example, school board officials or elected officials and school board meetings are designated public meetings. So if you share your results with the school board, especially in a school board meeting, you have just violated the embargo and shared data publicly before the release date. So once the release date happens, you can share that data, and we encourage you to use the media files that we make to share that data. The data in ADI also is not suppressed. And sometimes for protecting student privacy, you'll want to suppress data if the data are very small numbers or percentages or extremely large numbers and percentage, like if 100% of your students had a particular, data point. You want to make sure that you're suppressing those data so you're not revealing inadvertently private information about your students. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water there. So let's talk a little bit about the validations. And validations allow the districts and schools to preview their counts and their rates. They allow districts and schools to review the student level data that are used for the counts, and they ensure that the counts of diplomas and dropouts match the district student information system, and they allow you to correct or adjust your data, and they allow you to look at the data so you can see how the rules and the reporting of the data are followed, and then how they're going to impact the upcoming accountability reports with targets and ratings. And then you can also plan for local news releases because you're previewing the data. Now, you'll want to take a look at the data, and I'm going to talk you through which columns to really pay attention to later on in this presentation. And you want to look at anything and correct any inaccuracies. And make sure that when you're looking at the data, this gives you a heads up about what we are going to publish before it goes out publicly. And then you can understand how we got that data. Now, it's not required that you look at the validations, but they are the best way to review your data before they're made public to make sure that we're publishing accurate data for your district. And you want to be sure that high school principals, charter school staff, special education administrators, anyone who needs to know what the data are should be made aware of the data, where they are, and how they can access them before they're final. And this is the next slide. We're going to talk about how you can get permissions for the data, and also communicate to the other staff how they can get permissions to view the data. So Achievement Data Insight application is a password protected application, and I have pre-recorded a training that I did last year on the ADI application, and that is on a different website than the video trainings. It is on the Achievement Data Insight page, which is under applications on the district website. And so this is the link if you want to get to that page and view the training. There's a couple slides that I'm going to show you here that are about the same as in the training. But if you are new to this data viewer system, you really should look at this training. It's not that long of a training, but it goes through all the ins and outs and what you should expect to see. So you need to make sure that you have permissions to the validations that you need to view, and you need to make sure you have permissions to actually log into Data Achievement Insight. So you need a separate permission for that. And with the validations this fall, we're talking about the fall membership, the 4- and 5-year cohort rate, and the NCES dropout and graduation rates. So if you are looking at those 4 validations, you're going to need those 4 permissions plus the permission for Achievement Data Insight. And to get those permissions, you need to contact your district security administrator. Now, if you don't know who that is, you can look them up on the district website, and there's a link to look that up. And then when you're looking at these validations, they are in ADI. And so if you see the tile of the validation, and I'm going to show you a picture of what that looks like in a couple slides here. If that validation is grayed out, it means you don't have permission. And you can ask for permission and contact the DSA by clicking on the tile, and that will send an email that requests access. Now, looking at the validations, remember there's no accept button or a validate button. or you don't have to send us, it's nice when you send me emails saying, hey, I looked at the data, they're great, but you're not required to do that. Although I do enjoy hearing from all of you, and I do keep track who contacts me for all the validations I run. So later, if there's an issue, I can say, hey, they contacted me and they looked at their data, they edited their data, if I can tell that. But we can see who views the validation. And throughout the validations, I check that who viewed the validation. I run that code and take a look every so often. And so we don't need to have a button that you press. So that's why I need to talk to you during this presentation about how we actually validate and what that means and what the expectations we have for you about validating your data are. Okay, so this is what a tile looks like. A tile kind of looks like a file folder that's a square that's sitting on when you get into the ADI application. There will be a title at the top. And since we're talking about the cohort graduation rates, that's one of the examples for this slide. Okay, and then right below that, there'll be last visited, and that is the last day that you looked at that validation. The last refresh date is the last time that ODE refreshed the data in your validation in ADI. The validation open is when did the validation start? Okay, this is from last year, so your validation will say 10/22/2020 on it. And then validation closed, again, this example was from last year. Your validation will say 12/4/2020 on it. And the public release date will be blank because we don't know what it is yet. And I just want to talk about for a sec the data the tile was refreshed is not the same as the data as of date. And we're going to go through an example to talk about how what this data as of date means and what it means when you're submitting records at different times. So, we've talked a little bit about the embargo of the data. So once this public release date happens, that's when you can start sharing the data, and it may need to be suppressed in terms of the numbers if they're very small or very large. And ADI doesn't suppress any of the data because we use a password protection. So the data is only open to those people who have the permissions to view it. So when you're looking at this data inside your validation, you want to make sure that you're only going to be sharing the data that can be shared that won't reveal private details about your students. And that's also why we make the published media files readily available so you could share those. You don't have to do any extra work if you don't want to. So okay, so I guess not the very next slide, but in a couple slides there'll be examples of how the data interact to get into your validation that get put in the validation. But we're going to look at the inside now. Okay, so we click on the tile, and then you're going to see a page that looks like this. And the pages look the same for every validation, except up here, the validation title will be changed, the data owner will change. When I was going through these slides, I was like, uh-oh, Beth Blumenstein was the data owner last year. This year, it will say my name and my phone number. And but this tile was taken last year, and there'll be a reporting year. So the reporting year may not be the same as the data in the validation. for the cohort graduation rate and for the dropout rate validations, your reporting year is going to say 2021, but your data is going to be the school year we're reporting on, which will be 1920. So just be aware that when you're clicking on reporting year, it's going to show the default will be the current year, and then if you want to click here, it gives you a drop down menu where you can pick other years to look at other years validations. So, and also the other default is that it starts on the summary tab, and every validation has a summary tab and a detail tab. And and then also, I think this one actually has, so I've gone over the summary and the detail, and I've gone over what the reporting year is. And so next would be ask a question. So all the validations have these three buttons. Ask a question is, if you click on it, it will pop up an email, and the pop-up email will have my email address on it if I'm the data owner. And so it will go directly to me in a shared validation inbox. So if I'm not there, someone else can respond to it. Although I can tell you I don't plan on going anywhere for the next number of months. Even though I may be working from home, I'm not going anywhere else except to my computer to work. So if you have the email pop up, it's going to go directly to me, and then you can ask questions about the validation. You can ask questions about, hey, I don't see such and such student, and then you can put the student SSID, but nothing else, because email are not secure, and you can send me that email question. And if you need to send me more details about the situation, to explain the situation and actually send more information about the student private details, then you're going to want to go to the district website and do a secure file transfer. And the secure file transfer link on my page for the district website is right next to where the Find DSA link is. So they're really close in the same spot of the page. And so you can send a secure file transfer, then it comes to me, and then I can look at that private data, and we won't have accidentally released private details over the email and the internet somehow. And so the second button in the middle is the download data button, and you have two options for downloads. You can do a comma separated values, a CSV file, or you can do an Excel file. Now the Excel file is kind of weird, and it doesn't always look like what you think an Excel file should look like. So most people really want to have a CSV file, and because that will look more like what they expect maybe an Excel file to look at, so that usually is what people want. But if you're comfortable with that sort of altered Excel file, and that's the way you want your data, you also have that option. Okay, so we're going to go into the filter button a little bit and some of the features of the columns. And this is pretty much the same slide as I show in the ADI training. So hide filter, you can toggle between hide filter and show filter. When you have the show filter, then there are these little boxes that appear below each column header, and you could type in the value that you want. So in this case, they put TOT, which means total. So if they want to look at a specific grade, then you would put in, K through 12. But in this case, their search, they just want to look at the totals for all the students. So they put TOT, and then if you want to sort the columns. You can click on the column header itself, and that will sort up and down the numbers, the values. This is really handy sometimes when you're sorting, when you're looking for a specific type of a value, like the an alphabetical value. So sometimes if I'm looking for just a few students that are one kind of thing, I can click here and then I can group those students alphabetically so I know where on all the many pages of data they're going to be. And you can also change that's not on this slide, but you can also change the numbers of records shown per page, and sometimes that's really easy when you're going through a lot of data and the high school starts with a T or a W, so it's going to be at the end of all those, or you can also sort them so the W's are closer to the top of the page instead of at the bottom. So clicking headers to sort. Then finally, there's a third thing that we can do, and that is we can hover over a column. And when you hover over with your mouse, go like this. I don't know how well you can see my little arrow, but when you hover over, little pop-up information comes up, and that shows usually a very cursory, sort of basic definition of the thing that you're hovering over. So this is saying total number of attending students, because this is for fall membership, and actually, sorry, this is for spring membership, for student enrollment. Student enrollment does exclude program type code 9, and any students enrolled in the K through 12 grade range, which is the total. So a little bit extra information if you aren't sure what some of these column headers mean. Okay, so during this presentation, I'm going to read how to validate, and then I'm also going to show you screenshots. So we'll actually see what some of the data, how it's organized in the ADI format. So bear with me. Different people have different preferences for learning. And so some people like to read something, some people like to see it visually. So that's why we have tried to do sort of both ways for this presentation. And since cohort and dropout rates are very complicated, and they have lots of especially cohort has lots of exceptions, you really, I guess we don't, this is pretty complicated, and we don't really expect you to learn everything through this presentation. That's why we provide manuals and all sorts of guidance, but we realize that we want people to learn this as best they can. So like I say, there's a couple different styles of how I'm presenting the information through this presentation, and I hope that one of those styles will help you. All right, so what we do first when we are validating cohort, we've opened up ADI, we've selected the appropriate year. We want to look at student level data, which is the detail tab, to ensure that the outcomes are accurate for each student. And if you find an outcome that you believe is not accurate, first, you want to check to make sure that you reported the correct outcome to ODE. And if you have not, then you need to report that. Next, if you did report that outcome, ensure that the date reported on the ADM record was correct. Okay, because sometimes if you report something in first period, then by the time you get to annual, I sent out some email to people last month where some of the dates were off by a few days. Okay, you really need to make sure that your dates stay consistent when you're reporting students. So finally, you want to check the validation in ADI and make sure that a cohort refresh has occurred since you made your correction, and that would be using the as of date. Okay, So let's see, oh yeah, sorry. Okay, so the data as of date is the very last column to the extreme right of the display. And these displays can be very long, and you'll use your slider bar back and forth, keeping track of things. But the data as of date, and that's circled with the purple circled outlined with the purple rectangle, and again, ignore the calendar dates on these screenshots. I wasn't able to get up-to-date screenshots in time to make this presentation and be able to record it on time. So this is the very last column, and it is the data. It's the last day that you could have made edits to the data, or usually the day before that day was the last date that you could have made edits to the data to be picked up by this refresh in this validation. And so changes made by 10/9 are going to be included. Okay, so let's talk through an example about how that works in real time of you submitting records. Okay, you add a record for Bruce Banner on Friday, November 6th. And this is going to be a little bit of a weird example because there is a national holiday in this example. Okay, Friday, November 6th, ODE begins processing a validation refresh on Tuesday, November 10th. And actually this year for our validation refreshes, we're going to start processing on Monday. So yeah, so it'll be more like a Monday you'll need to get things in by. So, but in this example, ODE begins processing a validation refresh on Tuesday, November 10th, and you add another record for another student, Melinda May, on Thursday, November 12th, because, hey, Wednesday is Veterans Day, that's November 11th, and so hopefully you're not at work. I know I won't be at work that day, so then we refresh the validation in ADI on Thursday, November 12th at 1 p.m. And so the data as of date will be Tuesday because that's when we began processing. And the refresh then will be Thursday. Bruce Banner's record will be included in the refresh because you submitted it before Tuesday, but Melinda May's record was submitted after Tuesday, so she will not be in this refresh. So if you have reported the correct outcome to ODE and prior to the as of date that's currently displayed in ADI, but the outcome is not displayed as the student's outcome, you should review the rules in the manual or press the ask a question button to find out why. Okay, and you want to include the SSID number of the student. Don't share confidential email in an email. Sorry, don't share confidential information in an email. And you can also reach out to your regional ESD partners, but please follow the same rules for confidentiality of not including confidential information in an unsecure format like an email. And the other reason, besides being respecting confidentiality, that you want to not include personal identifiable information is that when I'm looking up stuff and when the regional ESD partners are looking up stuff, we can easily look up students by their SSID numbers, but it's harder, and just in terms of what we have to do, to look up students if we have their name or other types of information about them. I mean, those are helpful as we get to a deeper investigation of the problem, but the SSID number is where to start. Okay, so how do we make validation cohort? And I'm sorry, how to validate the cohort. I'm sorry, this slide is not. I think I should have changed this this title up there. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to review the student level data to ensure that the student groups, accountable institutions, and other data are accurate. So you're going to look at the gender ethnicity of the students, you're going to look at their different student groups, whether they're economically disadvantaged, whether there's special education, different things like that. This year we're adding foster care, which you may or may not know. And so if you find that data is inaccurate, there are a couple things to do. There's a couple different things that you would need to do depending on what kind of information it is. If it is the gender or ethnicity, and the student was enrolled in the 1920 or 21 school years, you can contact your regional ESD partners to request to have annual 1920 or the first period 2021 school years, those collections to be opened so you can edit the student records. For other student groups, those data might be final, and in that case you wouldn't be able to reopen the source to edit it. In the past, TAG and economically disadvantaged were some of those student groups that you could not correct because those are usually collected in the spring, in this case of 1920. This year we didn't do that process, so we had to make a substitute for it. So we actually use the annual ADM. So if you need this year only to edit TAG or ECD, you can edit that in your annual record, and it should show up in your cohort and graduation dropout NCES validation. And if it is some other kind of information that you can't edit, say English language learner status from last spring's collection, you will need to go through some sort of a appeal process or an update process where we would do an override. So I think we'll talk about appeals a little bit later too. So let's see. So this is looking at your detail page for your student. And the fields to the left of this would have personally identified information like name, birth date. Okay, I'm not going to put that on a screenshot. This is just as a generic example. So you've got their high school entry year, when they were enrolled, when they had their exit event, which would be their outcomes, the outcome type and rank. Okay, there are several different outcome ranks that all can lead to the same outcome type. In this case, a regular high school diploma. The best outcome rank is 10. That's what you want. The best thing would be for a low outcome rank, but there are different outcome ranks that all track with a regular high school diploma, depending on when the diploma was reported. And so if you want to learn more about the ranking, you can look at our outcome rank descriptions. I have the new file on the district website underneath the cohort validation. It's also on the ADM resources page. So, but you're going to look for outcome type, okay? And next you're going to look at who is accountable for those students. So you have an outcome district and you have an outcome school. Those are the school where the outcome occurred. Then you also are going to see the last enrolled degree granting district and school. Okay, so like I said, the outcome district and school is where we actually got the records information from. That would be like for a student who graduates, it shows which institution awarded the diploma. Last degree granting institution are typically the same as their outcome, but in some cases that's different because the last record could be someplace that wasn't an accountable institution like a LTCT, or if the student was enrolled at a district level program but had previously enrolled in a school but within the same program. So the last degree granting school would be shown there. And those are shown for your information. Now the really important section is the accountable district and the accountable school, because that's what you want to focus on, because those are the people who are accountable for the outcomes. And this will tell you where the student will be included when we do the aggregations. So the accountable institutions are the ones that are going to count toward those rates. Okay, usually accountable is the same as the last enrolled degree granting institutions, which we call LEDG. I'm not going to try to do all those acronyms. Okay, I'll try to spell it out. But these, again, just like outcome and last enrolled don't always agree. Sometimes last enrolled and accountable don't always agree. So all of the rules that determine who's outcome, who's last enrolled degree granting, who's accountable, all those rules are found in the cohort technical manual. And we'll also go over this a bit more later on in the presentation. Okay, focus on accountable institutions. Okay, the next set of data fields after that are the different student groups. If you see a Y, that means the student is in that group. Okay, so this student is a former English learner that exited before they got to high school. They are also economically disadvantaged. Okay, they do not have disabilities, and they were not an English learner while in high school. These fields would either be blank or they might show an in. Depends on the validation. Okay, so that's just pointing out the why. Okay, then also you're going to want to look at collection names. Okay, collection identifiers are just like the collection ID numbers we use here at ODE. You wouldn't necessarily know that. But this is like first period 8 a.m. Other means that we got this information from a external data source, usually. Okay, and that could be a GED match. Okay, and this, again, this is very close to the very right-hand end of the data. And okay, there's others sources. So you're going to look at adjusted cohort inclusion. So this shows that these students are going to be included. If there's a Y, they're included in that adjusted cohort. Okay, we'll be talking about like what the adjusted cohort is. I'll remind you of that in another couple slides. And if they're a Y, then that means they got a diploma or they got some other credential. They are continuing enrollment or a non-completer. If no outcome then they could have transferred out or were deceased if they are not a Y over here. So basically, this will tell you if the students are going to be in the denominator of the cohort calculation or not. We did get GED matching data a couple days ago, and we're in the process of loading it and testing it in our system right now. Things look good, so I expect it to be included in the validation when that opens on the 22nd. And so we'll talk a teeny bit about GED in a minute. I think I know one of these slides I talk about a little bit about how we match the data, and if not, I'll remember to later. So moving on, how to make corrections. Okay, so you see that there's a student who is enrolled in 1920 and their outcome data needs editing because they had a different outcome than is what is shown in ADI, or might be before ADI opens. Okay, the validation's open. So you're going to use exit adjustment to correct that data. If you have non-outcome data that needs to be edited, you can contact your regional ESD partners to edit the annual cumulative ADM. I can also open that for you, as well as Amanda Leopard can. If you're adding outcomes that occurred before 2019, 2020, you're going to contact your regional ESD partners to edit annual cumulative ADM and add a program for type 14 record. You know, depending on when you got the documentation. And it's best to put the program type 14 records in annual cumulative ADM instead of first period if it qualifies. It's much better to put it in annual because if you put it in first period, that means you got to put it in second period and third period and then finally in annual. And so if you can put it in annual, save yourself some work and put it in annual. Okay. If you need to remove a student from the cohort because their high school entry year is incorrect, you will need to appeal this. High school entry years are one of those things that once they're set, it's like they're set in stone, and the only way you can change them is to do a formal appeal process through the regional ESD partners, very specific template that you download and fill out, and you'll do this through secure file transfer. And so there are also some data that will be final, and they will need to be edited through an override process. And I'm the one who determines the overrides, and with help from my colleagues. And so you'll want to send me an email to request those kinds of override appeals. And as a reminder, be sure you're updating outcomes in the correct manner. For example, if a student exited in April last year, but you didn't receive a records request until September of this year, the 1920 outcome will not actually be updated in exit adjustment. You would need to update that through a program type 14 record in first period instead. And again, the October 1st training goes through the timing of when the program type 14 records need to go in to the ADM collection. And so please review that part 1 training if you need more help on that. There's also a program 14 record guidance on the ADM resources page. Okay, so if you, like I mentioned, if you can't correct your data, you must submit an appeal. If it's been that long and the data source is closed, I mean, our system is not set up so that we can just take in data all the time. Okay, so um, so the appeals that you would need to submit for cohort need to be submitted by December 4th. I may be able to accept some appeals after that date, but I can't guarantee that they would be included in cohort. So please get your appeals in early. Okay, so most corrections that you can make are going to be handled through program type 14 records. So appeals are rare, but let us know if you have a situation where you can't change the source data. So let's see some examples. Okay, we talked a little bit about economically disadvantaged and tag. Those are usually closed in the spring, but like I say, this year you can change those through ADM, annual ADM. We also, you might see data that you think is incorrect, and that could be from GED matching. Okay, like I say, we got the data this week, and we have done some, we've loaded it in the system, and we are in the process of testing it and checking matches. And so when we match the data from GED sources, we use like name and birth date. And there are students in Oregon, we have over 500,000 students in K through 12. There are students who have really close names and really close birth dates. So the GED matching is not perfect. We do the best we can, but the matches could be incorrect, and you could appeal if you see a problem with a GED match for one of your students. So most appeals can come through the Ask a Question button on the ADI validation, and you can submit details, just not confidential, personally identifiable information. And of course, you always want to include the SSID and the date that these outcomes happened. Okay, so all appeals also must be student level. Okay, we don't do aggregates like, oh, we have 15 students that received this outcome, but you only show 14. Okay, what you need to say is, we have a student with their ID of 123456 who received a GED on this date. Why aren't they in this aggregation? Okay, that's much better, because then we can look up that one student and figure it out. So, I mean, I've gotten emails like this from districts, so that's why I'm kind of chuckling a little bit, because, if it's like, okay, I can't help you, I need more information. So, everything we process is student level, so you will need to identify which student was not being counted. And overrides and updates are for the cohort rates only and do not apply to the NCES dropout rate. And last year, we had 170 overrides. The number of those were from appeals. And so this year, we will try to take what we know about the 15-16 students in the 5-year cohort from last year and apply it this year. So I've already run some code, and I think maybe 63 out of the 170 will maybe be able to be applied this year. So, but please, it never hurts to verify. If you submitted an appeal last year, when the validation opened, look for that kid and make sure that, if they're still enrolled and still earning a credential and going to be in the validation, that their data is still correct. Because, something could have happened. Maybe your appeal came in really late that last year and wasn't applied. I don't know everything that happened last year, even though I was pretty close to the process. I was not doing it myself. So, but please, never hurts to double check stuff. Okay, so again, if you have an update or an appeal, please submit them while the validation is open and being refreshed every week. Please, or every couple weeks, please submit this to me by noon on a Monday, so I can make sure that that is included in the refresh. And data edits in the ADM collection must be made by 5 p.m. on that Monday before the refresh is scheduled in order to be included in that refresh. That gives our computers are fast, like I have told many people, but they're not instantaneous. So if you submit your data by 5 p.m., that will give it a chance to process through our system and get copied over into our system. Because when you submit data to us, the changes go into what we call the transactional database. This is where you are transacting with us. You're submitting information to us, and then at midnight, we copy whatever we received into our operational data store. And so that will happen, in this case, on Monday night. And then Tuesday morning, we start processing the cohort. And so that's using what's in the operational data store. And that's going to take a number of hours. May take all day. It's definitely somewhere between 11 and 21 hours. I don't know yet exactly how long it will take, but it's been taking 21 hours now. It probably would be a little shorter once we roll it into production, but it's still a long time. So, and then, during the week, I will be checking the data to make sure that they are being processed correctly. And then Thursday, the refresh will happen where the data is put into the ADI application, and then you can view it on your computer. Okay, so we've talked about what's happening, and I showed you some dates earlier. So this is how the refreshes and the updates should happen. And there are 2 additional refreshes after December 10th, but that was because I wanted to give myself some time in case anything went awry with our processing, or we had some sort of an emergency appeal come in. And so the ADI refresh, the first refresh of the brand new data, is going to happen on October 22nd, and you will need to get your data edits in by 5 p.m. and your appeals updates by noon on October 19th. Okay, so that's the first refresh. You won't have seen the data before that to make an appeal or an update. So this will be data edits only for that date. And then the ADI refresh will happen again on October 29th. Overrides and data edits will need to be in on the 26th. November 5th is first period ADM. Sorry, first period ADM validation. The fall membership will be opening that day as well. So you'll need to get your information in by November 5th. Or sorry, November 2nd. I'm beginning to, the numbers are beginning to scramble here. So when we refresh on the week of Veterans Day, we're going to refresh on the 12th. So we really need to get that information in that Monday, on the 9th. Then we're going to refresh again on November 20th. And so you'll need to get that information in on the 16th. We do not refresh the week of Thanksgiving. And then December 3rd will be the last refresh before exit adjustment closes. So you need to get that information in on November 30th. And then the validations will be open 1 week past the close of exit adjustment. I think last week there might have been a little bit, there were only a few days between the close of one and the close of the close of exit adjustment and the close of all the validations. With everything that's been going on, I wasn't sure that was quite fair. And the way the weekends fell and the dates fell, I wanted to make sure that we had an additional week before we closed the validations. So that refresh before the validations close happens on December 10th. Please get your data in December 7th. And like I said, I will be having some extra refreshes, and the data will be final. The final refresh will be the 31st, and that data, probably the last data pull in terms of some of the student groups will be December 27th on Sunday. I think if it gets scheduled like that, I've requested that. And so then the final time to get your data overrides and appeals submitted, they probably would not go in if they were submitted on December 28th. That would be too late. So please, like I say, get your data edits and your corrections and your overrides in as soon as possible. So we cannot guarantee that appeals will go in if they are not submitted, preferably by December 4th, but I think probably December 11th would be okay, but it's still, that doesn't give me a lot of time to make sure that the data all go through correctly and then process what I need to process and calculate for the communications documents that I have to write once we have final data. So let's see. Okay. So the other thing that you want, now we're going to go into validating NCES grad drop. And again, you want to start by reviewing the outcomes. And not all students are going to be included in the NCES validation. Okay, this includes students who are considered early leavers and high school completers. This includes students who were awarded a credential, students who were dropouts, and students who were coded as transfers. So not the students who were coded as continuing. Okay, again, we go over this in much more detail in the October 1st training. You will want to complete exit adjustment before viewing your NCES graduation and dropout validation, because your changes in exit adjustment are going to affect the numbers that are going to be shown during the refreshes of NCES. So, other outcomes are important at ODE and for your students, but for this validation, they only are looking at those students who are graduates within the last year and dropouts within the last year plus some extra time. Okay, so that's a very limited number of students who directly impact those NCES rates. So when you're looking at the validation and you're looking at the data, there are going to be some spaces that may be different if you're looking at one school, between one school and another. You're going to show either fall membership or the ADM enrollment are going to be your denominators. And so the denominator for the dropout rate is going to be shown, in this case, all of the denominators that they used were from fall membership. Usually fall membership is used. There are some schools who will use a ADM enrollment that's estimated for the number of students that they had throughout the year. And those are going to be schools who may not have been open on October 1st. And with the forest fires, we were a bit concerned that there might be more schools not open by October 1st. And then also there are alternative schools that may not be in session during this time. And so they might have highly mobile students. So they would be using ADM enrollment because that figure for them would be more accurate than using a fall membership count. And then the next thing you're going to look at, I'm sorry these arrows are not right on. I've really messed with the arrows to try to get them to point better, but it just seems like it just didn't want to happen. So anyway, so the dropout count, which should be pointing to here, is basically just counting who dropped out. Okay, and then the percent of the number of dropouts. I'm afraid to click that again, sorry. The percent of dropouts, which is this column here, is just the number of dropouts divided by the denominator for that student group. So in this case, for females, you got 24 female students who dropped out divided by fall membership of 522. And so that gives you a rate of 4.6%. Okay. So then you also will be looking at the grad counts. Okay. These are the number of graduates that NCES counted. And so this are only graduates who were awarded with a 4A or a 4G and diploma type 1 or 2. This only includes those awarded in a single year. For this case, ignoring these dates again, this will be for this year, the 1920 school year. So whoever got a diploma, the regular or modified 4A or 4G diploma, those students are the ones counted as graduates. Okay, and again, they're going to be divided by the number of graduates plus dropouts. Okay, so to get that rate. So you take the number of graduates, 130 plus 24, and then you're going to divide 130 divided by that would be 154, and that gives you 84.42% graduated out of those girls. Okay, the graduation rate does not use the fall membership as the denominator, and that is why that the dropout percent and the grad percent don't add up to 100. Okay, in this case, the bottom line we're looking at, it would add up to somewhere of 89%. Okay, that's 89% isn't 100. So you can't expect those numbers to be adding up to 100 because they don't use the same denominators. Okay, so in cohort, oh, sorry, we're still on NCES. We're sort of comparing the two, okay? So in cohort, it's really complicated to figure out who is accountable. In NCES, it's very simple. It's just the resident district and school on the record, which is typically the student's last record. And you're going to see a series of student flags. So again, this is the resident district and school. So that's the one that's accountable for NCES. And then you're going to see all of these different student groups for this student, okay? And finally, at the very far right, before you get to the data as a date, you're going to see the outcome information, okay? And what the student got, when, what descriptions of what he did and what happened, what he was awarded. And then you're also going to see some calculated outcome types. Okay, so I think, yeah. Sorry, I know there's animation on this slide, but I haven't gone through exactly what okay, there's not going to be any more arrows that point, but I'm going to go through each of these calculated and flags. So calculated outcomes are something you're going to really want to look at, because they're going to tell you how the student is going to be included in the calculations for dropout and for graduation. Okay, and then there, so in this case, the student got a high school diploma. The calculated outcome is the high school diploma. Calculated outcome for a diploma type code 1. And so they got a diploma, okay? It's pretty obvious from the record here. So they do not have a yes below the dropout flag because they didn't drop out, okay? And then you're going to look at the graduate flag and make sure, yes, they got a diploma, they didn't drop out, they have a yes under the graduate flag. So they're going to be included in that graduation rate, and they're not included in the dropout. And again, ignore the data as of dates because these are old screenshots. So, and you can also, using your different functions on column headers, you can filter to look at only dropouts or only graduates, okay, to double check your data. And and do ascending and descending to check out different students that dropped out or graduated. So those are ways that you can look through this data and make sense of it and make sure that it's accurate. All right. So like I said before, there's no accept button. Every time that you log in, that's tracked in our system, and I can run a code and see all the days you actually looked at the validation. I can't tell how long you looked at the validation, whether you just opened it and closed it, but I can see that, oh, hey, you looked at it this many times. And so validations are an opportunity to review and correct your data prior to when we publish it. And our expectation is that all the data submitted is as accurate as it can be, and we encourage you to validate the data. But it's not mandatory. You're not going to get in trouble. But if you don't look at it, you might be getting a reminder email. In fact, I can guarantee you will be getting a reminder email, if not from me, from the regional ESD partners. And so, it's probably a good thing to look at your data, and it's a good thing if you're submitting more records to look at it more than once. And so if you do not visit the validation, you will receive a reminder. And also, please, please, please make sure that charter school staff, high school principals, special ed administrators, registrars, and any other parties at your school district are also able to visit the validation and review the data if you have a need for them to have access to. And so many times I've gotten emails and calls from charter schools on the very last day of validation is opened saying, we can't look at our data. Okay, so please make sure that you help your colleagues have access to this data, because it affects them too, and it affects the overall rates for your districts, and it's just a nice thing to do as a colleague, to make sure that they have access, that they understand how they can get access, and that they are looking at their data, especially if for your charter schools, if they're responsible for submitting their own data. It's very important that they have access to look at the data that they've submitted, so they understand what correct data looks like and what the data mean. All right, so this is a chart that was I went over in the first training for the differences between reports. So the differences in the denominator, where we use for the dropout rate, the dropout count divided by fall membership in most cases. The graduate rate is the number of graduates divided by the number of graduates plus dropouts. For cohort, that denominator is your adjusted cohort. Your adjusted cohort for the 4 years, or the adjusted cohort for the 5 years. So those are all the students for 4 years that entered high school in 2016-2017, minus students who became deceased or transferred out permanently out of the cohort. The adjusted cohort for 5 year are the students who entered high school in the 15-16 cohort year, minus the students, again, who were deceased or permanently transferred out. Or maybe the word is not permanent, but definitively transferred out. They left the state, they left the country, they went to homeschool, they went to private school. Yes, and you have documentation that shows that. So, and then for NCES, graduates are very limited to just regular and modified diplomas with 4A or 4G ADM intake codes between 9/1/2019 and the end of the summer, August 31st, 2020. So just 1 year, okay? And then for graduates in cohort, those are all the students who received in that adjusted cohort who received regular or modified diplomas between 7/1/16, which should be the start of the 2016-2017 school year, and August 31st, 2020, or for the 5-year regular modified diplomas earned between 7/1/15 and 8/31/2020. And then again, I'm sorry if this teal line is messing up your reading of the last line here. I'll have to change that for next year. It's hard because I want everything to be clear and visible. And but students who were reported as dropouts, and this is only within a certain time frame, which is the 1920 school year, plus students who were reported as dropping out between 5/1 and 6/30 of 2019. So these are students who dropped out at the very, very end of the 18-19 school year. Those students are added to the dropouts within the 1920 school year, and that counts as your total dropout count in the NCES validation. The cohort doesn't calculate dropout rates, they don't track them, and so we don't have any information about cohort dropout rates. Okay, so we've made a few changes for the 1920 school year, and one thing we did was to add a foster care group. This is a group that is required under federal law for us to report. And so we've been working to be compliant with that law for some time, and we've gotten data several times from DHS, and so we have received the data. We've matched it again through name and birth date as best we can for the cohort. This will be students who were foster care anytime during their high school years that span the cohort reporting periods. So that would be 2016-17 through 2019-20 for the 4-year cohort, or through 2015-16 through the 19-20 school year for the 5-year cohort. Okay, and then for NCES, that would be any students in foster care in the last 2 years of high school. Before that would be the 1920 high school, sorry, the 1920 school year and the 18-19 school year. Those students would be considered current foster care students. Okay, we also had a technical change for English learner and former English learner student groups. Last year, and I mean 1920, we had school closures because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we came up with a new LEP record code type for students who could not be tested with the ELPA screener, or they could not be exited. They could not be tested to see if they were eligible for English learner services. So they have the SE, or State of Emergency Record Type Code. And so those students, because we didn't know if they were an English learner or not, that we cannot count them as an English learner. And then third period AM, because of the pandemic, was not collected in 1920. And consequently, the spring membership extract and the student enrollment validation did not take place, which was a good thing because I was learning about cohort. So I had more time to learn. But that made things a little tough on us because we didn't have we didn't collect some of the data that we take out of the spring membership extract, like economically disadvantaged and tag status. And so we took that data from the annual cumulative ADM collection, and that was used to create a substitute spring membership. And we will be refreshing that membership, not as often as the fall membership, but we will refresh it maybe 5 times or so. And so I will be, when that refresh schedule is finalized, I will be posting that in the AA updates so you know about it. And I haven't seen too many changes as I've been looking at the data from day to day with the tag, and ECD, economically disadvantaged. So, but it could, you could make changes, and then I felt that we should have a few refreshes because this, we want, if people make data edits, that those data edits are honored and incorporated into the collection or into the validation. So, so like I say, we use that substitute to determine tag and economically disadvantaged student groups, and and we also added some audits to the annual ADM collection to allow districts to really examine those data and make sure that they were as accurate as possible. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the methodology for dropouts. So dropouts are going to be dropouts at the very end of the 18-19 school year, dropouts throughout the entire 1920 school year. So those dropouts at the very end of the year are students who are coded 3F. Dropouts throughout the school year in 1920 were coded 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D, 3E, 4B, and 5E. And then we have a time period that can affect dropouts, and that would be if students who previously dropped out re-enrolled. So those students, they may have dropped out here or here, but they've now re-enrolled in first period 2021, and so technically they're not a dropout because they came back to school, so they're removed from the dropout count. So students whose last event was between May 1st, 2019 and June 30th, so they completed the school year, but then they did not re-enroll by October of 2019. They're going to also be they're going to be a 3F. Okay, students whose last event was somewhere between July 1st and June 30th, they have the ADM indate codes, like I say, 3A through 3E, and 4B and 5E. Those are also counted as dropout. And then, of course, you subtract out the students who did re-enroll by 2021. Okay, so that's how we get our dropout counts. So unlike the cohort graduation rate, the dropout rate validation does not include all the reported students. It only includes dropouts and graduates. And it will display records for some additional students, but not all of them. For this reason, please work on exit adjustment first before beginning with the NCES dropout, because when you're changing 3Es and 3Fs to 1As because they came back, you know, that's going to change your rates. But conversely, if you have a student that you thought was coming back, so you put 1A as their ADM exit code, if they did not come back by October 1st, which is the last day of first period, you must change them to a 3E if they did not finish the entire school year, or a 3F if they did finish the school year. And I think this year, with the 10-day drop rule being only applying to before the pandemic conditions, I think we're going to see a lot more 3Fs compared to 3Es. I'm not sure we even pay attention to that, what that ratio is, but I'm curious. I'd like to know, you know, what the difference will be between these two dates or end date type codes. So, yes, so it cannot stay 3A if they did not come back. So. All right, and then the other thing, you're going to, as you change these indate codes, they may add students to your NCES validation. So if you've looked at the NCES validation, then you've made some adjustments to exit adjustment, you're going to want to go back and look at that NCES validation after its following refresh, just to make sure that the data still look like what you expect. Okay, again, this is more of a graphic of the dropout calculation. The dropout count divided by the fall membership gives you the dropout rate. And if a student drops out more than once in a year, you only count them once for the year. So a student drops out in December, comes back in February, drops out again in April, comes back in May, drops out before the end of June. Okay, they've dropped out 3 times, but you only count them once. Okay, Then a student dropping out multiple times across multiple years is counted once per year that they dropped out. So if they dropped out in 1819 and then they dropped out again in 1920, they're going to be counted for the 1819 school year, and they're also going to be counted for the 1920 school year. And the accountable school district and school are the student's last resident district and school. So the graduation rate for NCES is the number of graduates divided by the graduates plus the dropouts. And this rate is no longer posted on our website, but it is reported to the U.S. Department of Education and provided to researchers for data requests upon a request. So let's see. Okay, students who enroll in expanded options or other college credit programs, district level programs, or GED prep programs or private placements that are tracked in tuition by the district and then drop out are still dropouts, and they needed to be reported following the same rules as students in any other standard program. Okay, so this is just comparing NCES to cohort verbally. Again, like I say, there are different ways of processing the information, and hopefully this will be helping some people who are watching the slide. So NCES starts with the students who are coded as dropouts or graduates. And then we use additional logic to remove students from the dropout count. You know, so they came back first period, we pull them out of the dropout count. Or we have a GED record, you know, so they are not necessarily a dropout. Okay. Cohort starts with everybody. Okay, that's our unadjusted cohort. It's everybody who started high school in 1617. And then out of all those students, we find an outcome for all of them. And then the students for whom there is no better outcome are counted as dropouts and non-completers, whether or not they're even coded as a dropout. Okay, so, you know, like I say, we have a ranking system of outcomes. The best is the lowest number that the student is ranked as, a 10 being a regular high school diploma, and it gets over 700 at the bottom end of the ranks. So the students, we figure out what their best outcome is, and then that's how they're coded. So the NCES methodology does not account for calculated end date codes, but they use the actual end date code. So if you did not do your exit adjustment and there are some wrong codes in your ADM end date codes, then those codes those wrong codes will be used and students will be counted incorrectly. Okay, so methodology and rate calculations for the cohort. Like I say, we identify everybody in a cohort. Then we look at all of their records and we assign, based on ranking, what their outcome is, what their best outcome is. Now, what do we count as an outcome? Like I say, the best one is getting a regular high school diploma. Postgraduate scholars, they would be people who got a regular diploma, who are coming back to attend, and they meet certain criteria. They're coming back to attend some college credits. So, and you'll see awarded by certain dates. You know, the award by affects where you are as a ranking, and just moving down the page we're going to go from the lowest ranking, which is the best score, a 10, to something that is far higher, like we get to be at 350, 400 in this area, um, and then way down at the bottom, you're looking at people who have outcome ranks around 700. So regular high school diplomas, postgraduate scholars, modified high school diplomas, those are all really fairly low. Then you have people who transferred out, okay, that or were deceased or permanently disabled. So those are transfer out events that remove them from the cohort. So those have a fairly good rank too, because they're the best outcome. Take them out of the cohort so they don't affect the rate when they have had a permanent event happen. These could be students who move to another state or country that you have required documentation for. Students who transfer to homeschool, again, required documentation. Students who transfer to private schools, and students who are deceased or permanently incapacitated. And all of these require specific documentation that can be found. I believe it's on page 45. It starts at page 45, but there's hints about these documentation that goes on to like page 50 and 51. And then you have other completers. Okay, they got an adult high school diploma, maybe at a community college. They got an extended diploma. They got a GED. And either you told us about the GED or you awarded it if you have that GED program at your school or district, or we matched it to records that we got from the GED Corporation. Okay, then finally the lower outcomes are people who did not complete. Okay, they got an alternative certificate. They are continuing to enroll to possibly go for a 5th year or eventually complete a credential, or they dropped out, or for some reason, other circumstances, they just have not completed what they needed to complete for their diploma or other credentials. And again, here's a link to the outcome rank document. And okay, transfer out events or student deceased. These are only counted if they are the student's last event or close to the student's last event. For example, Mary is enrolled from September 2016 through May 2017, then transfers to a private school, and code 2B, 2 for a transfer, B would be to private school or homeschool, and that's within the state of Oregon. So then in October of 2017, she re-enrolls in her previous school district and then earns a modified diploma in 2020. Mary would be counted as a modified diploma, not a transfer out, because a modified diploma is a lower outcome rank than transferring out. All right, so we've been talking about some of these definitions, and I probably should put this slide a little closer to the front, but cohort has very specific definitions of different groups of students. Unadjusted students are all the students within a particular cohort, and most of the examples we're talking about are 4 years, but the rules for 5 years are just almost the same. Adjusted cohort is the unadjusted minus any students whose outcome was transferred out or deceased. Graduates are all the students in the adjusted cohort who earned or were awarded a regular or modified high school diploma by August 31st, 2020. And completers are all the students in the adjusted cohort who earned or were awarded a regular, modified, or extended high school diploma, or were awarded a adult high school diploma or GED by August 31st, 2020. And again, this is a graphic for people that learn this way. Cohort rate are the graduates divided by the adjusted cohort, and completer rate is the completers divided by the adjusted cohort. So very simple calculations. You want to make sure that all of your graduates and completers are reported accurately, because you want to make that numerator as high as you can get it for a better rate. Okay, and then you want to make sure that your adjusted cohort is accurate. Okay, so if there are kids that transferred out, you want to make sure that they're reported correctly, so you can make this denominator as low as you can get it. Okay, because that will give you a better rate. Now, even if it doesn't affect your district's data, accurate in-date code reporting is so important because it can impact other districts' data or the state's overall rates. And you want to be a kind, professional colleague and make sure that your data is the best, most accurate you can make it. And this will reflect well on your district, and it will also help other districts. So it's a good thing to be kind, okay? And doing your data correctly is a kind thing to do. So for accountable institutions, I'm sorry if I hit the microphone there, accountable to the last degree granting institution they were enrolled in, okay? So that's in general for cohort, okay? And this is going to be the resident institution during the cohort years 1617 to 1920 for the 4-year cohort. Now for students whose last enrollment was at the district level, ODE will attempt to find the last degree granting school they were enrolled in and then assign them to that school for accountability. All right, so we're going to go over some examples now about students being enrolled at different places and then how that affects the accountability for those different institutions. So the slide's going to get really busy, but we're going to go step by step. So a student enrolls in Magenta School District, transfers to Orange School District in September 2016, then graduates from Orange School District in June 2020. Orange School District is accountable. It's the last place they were at. There were no other transfers and registrations anywhere else. So that one's pretty straightforward. Student enrolls at Aqua School District at Daisy Johnson Charter School and remains enrolled there through June 2020 without earning a credential. In September 2020, the student transfers to Chartreuse School District. The student is still accountable to Aqua School District and Daisy Johnson Charter School. And that is because when they transferred in September, first period 2021, that is outside of the cohort period of 1617 through 1920. So they're outside of the cohort period when they transfer. So the last degree granting school within that cohort period was Daisy Johnson and Aqua School District. So those are going to be accountable. Student enrolls at Crimson School District at Colson Memorial High School. The student transfers into a Crimson School District level program in May 2016. And I should say that they started in September 2016. And then they remained in the district level program until they withdraw from school in June 2018. The student is accountable to Crimson School District and to Colson Memorial High School. This student looks like possibly a dropout, so they withdrew. So these were the last degree granting institutions they were at, so they would be the accountable institutions. And then one last example, a student enrolls in Crimson School District at Colson Memorial High School. The student transfers to Aubergine School District and then returns to a district level program at Crimson School District in May of 2017. So enrolled 2016, stayed until May, and then then returns back to a district level program. So they remain at the district level program in Crimson School District until they withdraw from the school in June 2017. The student is accountable to Crimson School District, but since they went to a different district between being, after they enrolled in a school, but before they came back to the Crimson District, they are not accountable to any school within Crimson. So it's because they went to another district in between enrollments at Crimson School District. If they had not transferred to Aubergine School District, then Colson Memorial High School would have remained their accountable school, even if they'd gone back to a district program. Okay, so accountability for students who have 4F and 4G ADM end-date codes. Students earned a diploma for 4F, but they were not awarded the diploma because they were enrolled fewer than 4 years of high school, and then they remain enrolled for the current 2021 school year. Okay, so they were awarded, they were a junior or a sophomore, say, they earned their credits, and whatever other requirements they completed to get a diploma. They have not been awarded the diploma yet, but they're continuing to be enrolled in their high school. Okay, for G, these students were awarded a diploma, but they are continuing into postgraduate scholars. And there are several criteria for that. Not everyone meets those criteria. So here are some examples. A student attends Carroll Danvers High School from September 2016 to May 2019. The student meets their diploma requirements, but elects to remain enrolled for a 4th year, so she is reported as a 4F ADM end-date code. Okay. September 2019, the student enrolls in Kamala Khan Early College Academy for her 4th year of high school. In this case, let's make it simple. Both schools are in the same district. She completes the year there, and in June 2020 is awarded her diploma and reported with a 4A ADM end-date code. In the 1920 cohort graduation rates, the student's outcome will be high school diploma awarded, okay, because she earned it, she was awarded it, and the accountable school will be, where did she get that diploma? Okay, she earned it at Carroll Danvers. She may have attended a second high school, but they didn't award her the outcome. Carroll Danvers did. So Carroll Danvers is her accountable school. Okay, so there are students who are accountable to the state for several reasons. Sometimes it's because they had an unconfirmed transfer. And this information is going to be displayed under accountable institutions columns in the validation, okay? And this is just highlighting with this purple triangle, or sorry, purple rectangle, what the names of the accountable district name, accountable school institution ID, and accountable school name. And so you are going to want to focus on accountable institutions, and these institutions use the resident last enrolled degree granting district to display the data, even when the accountable district is the state. So those places that were the last enrolled degree granting institution are going to be able to see students that they are not accountable for, that are accountable to the state, but because the student was last enrolled at their institution, they're going to see that in ADI. Okay, and this always uses resident institutions, not attending. Okay, some students will only be accountable to the state. So in this case, Portland, I don't know if you can see that fine print, but Portland was the last enrolled degree granting district and school name, okay, district level program. And again, ignore the date. And you'll see a 999-99905, which is the institution ID for the state, okay, that we use in our codes in our databases. So this tells you that the student had their last enrollment at Portland, but the student is accountable to the state for because of the student's outcomes and the dates that they occurred. So, and this student is not going to be included in Portland or any other district's unadjusted cohort. And it's not going to affect any of those other districts' rates. It'll affect the state rate, but not any particular district. This is basically for information. So when a last degree granting institution is checking out their data and they say, well, what happened with so-and-so, or aren't I responsible for so-and-so, accountable for so-and-so, they can go, oh, hey, that the state's responsible for them. And, you know, that's good to know where these students get to. So, all right. So I think this is like, yeah, Portland will see the student's record, but the student will not count against them for any reason. So, okay. So student groups. Gender and ethnicity are based on the student's outcome record. So students may, or students' parents may change gender and ethnicity from time to time for various reasons, but that gender ethnicity is based on whatever was put on the record that is selected to represent that student's outcome. And if the outcome does not have a gender ethnicity associated with it, like a GED match record, then their most recent ADM record is used. Now for other student groups, except for former English learners and CTE, they could include students who were a member of the student group at any time during the 4 or 5 years being measured. And that could be based on spring membership, the English Learners Collection, or the special education collections. These collections are not typically editable at the time the cohort is being validated. And if you find one of these that's incorrect, please contact me using the Ask a Question function. Unless you need to send many students or confidential information, then you should use the secure file transfer function to request an update or override. No. Oop. Okay. I thought there was one more thing on my notes, but I already said it during that slide. So, okay. So, what about cohort summary and aggregate and data versus student level? Okay, you've seen some of this in screenshots. The summary level tab, you're going to review your totals first, and then you're going to look at your student group counts. Okay, and then you make sure all of the high schools and combined schools with high school grades in your district are included in ADI on those reports. And you remember that your district total is not necessarily the sum of the school totals. Okay, you know, even if your district has only one high school, you should still check out your district level totals, because they will include your district level programs plus your high schools. So you want to make sure all those totals are what you expect, and you want to make sure that all the diplomas awarded have been reported and counted. Okay, you're going to check students who are listed as dropouts or non-completers to make sure that you don't have any additional documented outcomes for them. Okay, and you want to make sure to only report outcomes you have documentation for. Okay, I believe that's documentation rules start on page 45 of the ADM manual, and we discuss documentation a bit during the part 1 training. So, you know, I think I came up with the phrase, or actually one of the regional ESD partners came up with the phrase, if it's not documented, it doesn't get reported. So it's very important that your documentation matches the outcomes that you think you have. So looking at the student level, ADM, student information system, and what access is needed. Okay, so you want to make sure that the first thing you do is you're submitting your first period cumulative ADM, and you make sure that that's complete and it's accurate. Okay, then you're going to look at exit adjustment. You're going to check your cumulative ADM as you're verifying this. You're going to check for duplicate SSIDs and request merges from the help desk. And you're going to verify that you have the accurate date for program type 14 records, whether you submitted them to annual ADM or first period ADM. Okay. You're going to verify that all the schools and school personnel who need access have the access and are reviewing their data. And that, you know, if you work in a school district office and your district has charter schools that report their own data, you're going to make sure that they're aware of the validations, that they know how to get access, that they have access to all 3 validations, as well as fall membership, as well as ADI in general. The same goes for regular schools who are responsible for reporting their own data. It's for make sure for special ed directors, for high school principals, school registrars, anyone who needs to look at the data. And as you are all looking at the data, you must remember that the data are embargoed until the public release date. So you can share them with authorized district and school staff, but make sure that they know that they can't share secondhand the data to somebody else that's not authorized. Okay, begin as early as possible. If you do not finish your changes before the last validation refresh, you will not get a chance to preview the results until it is too late to make additional edits. And I realize it's kind of hard this year because our end date happens December 31st. And I'm sorry that that's the way the calendar hit. And I'm also running fall membership. So there was a bit of a crunch of the two validations, activities on one validation happening when the other one was finishing up. So, I did the best I could for my own workload and hopefully for your workload. So please begin as early as possible. Let your regional ESD partners, myself, or Amanda Leopard know if you have problems or challenges. So I think that's it. We want to help you get this work done. We want to help you make sure that it's as accurate as it can be. We are here to support you and to help you, but we do have particular deadlines for getting things out, and sometimes those deadlines seem a bit harsh, but we really want to help and support you in whatever way we can. Okay, so for NCES, okay, you're going to focus on your calculated outcome types and the dropout and the graduate flags. And don't worry so much about non-dropout, non-graduate outcomes, okay? Because you're only worried for NCES on dropouts and graduates, and very narrow definitions as to what those are, happening only within a certain school year. So the non-dropout, non-graduate outcomes, as long as you've reported them correctly in ADM for NCES, then it's okay. All right, so, and remember, if a student has re-enrolled, okay, you're going to see something like this on your validation. So you reported the student as a 3E. They left before the end of the school year, and you don't know what happened with them, okay? But you see a calculated outcome code of a 99, and they didn't get a diploma. That's why it's not applicable here. They didn't get one issued. It's not in the type codes, okay? What does that mean? It means that somewhere else, some other school district, they re-enrolled in 2021. Okay, so they are not a dropout. They are not being counted against you as a dropout. And so, but you may not have received any documentation from this other school district. Okay, so you keep your codes as they are because you have not received any documentation. But maybe, what's been happening over the last 6 months, and, between pandemics and forest fires, it's been crazy, okay? We know this, and you know this, okay? And we are sympathetic and compassionate about that, okay? Life happens. So maybe you go back in your files and you go, oh, hey, I did get a documentation record request that's proper and as required. Then I can go back into exit adjustment before December 4th and change this in date code to, a transfer. Okay, where'd they transfer to? Okay, then I know what letter to put there. It's going to be a 2A for a public school district, or a 2 something else for other situations. You can look at the in-date type code guidance for that on the ADM resources page. But yes, so the student was re-enrolled in 2021, so they're not a dropout. So that's why looking at validations is important, because this is all the data in the state that's reflected in these, so you can find out things that you don't necessarily know about because you don't have the records showing that re-enrollment, but it's going to pop up on your validation. Okay, there's the 3E code. There's the 99 calculated code. Okay, that's why the calculated things are important for this, and the calculated outcome type. This is important for NCES. Calculated in-date codes are not that important except for correcting your data with respect to, say, cohort. And again, because they're not a dropout and they didn't graduate, at least not yet, so they aren't going to have a flag for dropout or for graduate. Okay, so for fall membership, this is just the tips and reminders. Make sure to review your second period ADM audits as soon as they open. That's January 14th. You will only have until 1 p.m. January 14th through the end of the day on January 22nd to make any changes to fall membership that you might have to make once you have reviewed and dealt with your second period audits. And there will be absolutely no changes to fall membership allowed after January 22nd. Okay. Okay, we're to the last couple slides here. These are references to the AA Update newsletter. I've mentioned that once or twice during our training. I have written all my posts to February. Okay, I try to be really organized, and so I have an AA update in the newsletter about this training that will be posted on October 15th. Hopefully this training will be posted October 15th, but any last minute news that we need to get out to you, we will have on the AA Update newsletter. We also have our accountability webinar once a month at the end of the month. So we can also share information, up to the minute information at that time. And the video training 2021, this lists all the training for all the different collections and validations throughout the year. And you can review recorded trainings, and even a data owner like myself, I will review people's trainings, especially if I haven't given the training before. I try to review to see what the last person did. So if there's any knowledge that's not in the notes, then I know, I should probably say that. So yeah. So very good video training. Again, the ADI training is on a different page. It's on the ADI application page if you want to see that training. That is a standalone training I recorded last year. It is not meant to be refreshed every year because it should not change, because ADI pretty much functions now as it functioned when it was started back, I think, in 2013. So it hasn't changed very much. So that training will probably not be redone for another few years. Okay, and this is our big list of all the links to all the different manuals, cumulative ADM resources, fall membership, the plan for the Every Student Succeeds Act, our at-a-glance school district and school profiles, what the law says about postgraduate scholar qualification criteria, and the background behind that program. Also, if you need to make a high school entry year appeal, okay, there's guidance on that. I did go over the appeal, some tips on how to make a successful appeal on the Part 1 training. So let's see, program type 14 guidance. So when should I submit a program type 14 record, and what collection should I put it in? Okay, so very important links. And then finally, this is the human resources you have behind you. Our regional ESD partners who represent decades worth of experience and are just amazing people. They have encyclopedic knowledge about almost, well, all the collections that they help provide support to. And, just lovely people. And then myself, Robin Stalkup, it is best to email me. During the pandemic, we have been working from home I've been working from home since March 13th, okay? And I'm not going back to the building until 2021 or later because our offices are closed through 2020. And so please email me. If you need me to call you, I would be happy to do so. Please email me your phone number. You could also call our switchboard number, and they can track me down really quickly. I actually had them track me down this week because of someone called in with a data request, and they said, "Hey, can you help them out?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I'm the data owner for Fall Membership. I can do that." So, I am available even if I'm working from home, and so please let us know if we can help. And good luck with validating your data, with completing your ADM data submissions, with completing your exit adjustment, and looking over your data. And I will definitely be talking to you through the accountability webinars and through the AA update. Please sign up for the AA update if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much.